I always say I met Carter in the second grade. At least, that's the version I've told for years. The truth is, it's been so long that the edges of those memories have blurred. I couldn't tell you what our first conversation was about, or if we even had one. One day, he was just there, quietly orbiting around me like a shadow, and somehow he never left. Back then, he was a quiet kid, the kind who didn't need to speak much to be noticed. By the time we actually talked, really talked, it felt like I'd known him forever. The other kids at school weren't always kind, but with Carter around, it never really got to me. He was always there for me. In high school, he had my back during fights. In college, when I felt like I didn't belong anywhere, he stayed close. He was there when my marriage fell apart, when I thought no one else would be. Carter was the one constant, the one person I could truly rely on. We ended up sharing a tiny 2-bedroom apartment in a rundown complex downtown. The place reeked of cat litter and something sharp, like ammonia, that never faded no matter how many air fresheners the landlord installed. Still, we made it work. We had each other, and that was enough. After I lost my job, I spent countless late nights at the kitchen table with Carter. I'd ramble about anything and everything, and he'd sit there quietly, coffee in hand, offering a comment here and there, just enough to keep me going. He's always been the best listener. His thoughts usually mirror mine, like we share the same internal rhythm. Not that he never challenged me, he did, but even then, it always felt like we were on the same page with one another. One late night during an otherwise forgettable weekend, Carter sat across from me, sipping his coffee. He looked up and said,
"That place was too small for you anyway. You deserve more than what that company ever gave you."
His voice lingered in the air, gentle but firm like the steam curling from his mug.
"They never deserve someone as good as you."
I later mentioned that to my therapist. She gave me a tight-lipped look and scribbled something into her notebook. She told me I was projecting. I asked her what exactly I was supposed to be projecting onto, and she launched into this carefully worded explanation about codependence and emotional boundaries, how I'd supposedly built my world around Carter. I didn't let her finish. I stood up and walked out before she could say another word. Turns out, before the session, she had gotten in touch with my emergency contacts. None of them had anything good to say about Carter. Not a single person. This was a betrayal, one I never even saw coming. After that, I stopped going to therapy. I blocked my friends, cut off anyone who made me feel like I had to justify my loyalty. I even called my mom, hoping maybe she'd understand. But all she said was,
"He's been in your life for years. Don't you think it's time you tried to separate from him?"
That conversation didn't last long. Carter was my best friend. He'd never hurt me, never let me down, and yet the people who claimed to love me had nothing but suspicion and warnings to offer. I wasn't just angry, I was livid, furious in a way that made my skin feel too tight. When I got home, Carter was right where I expected him to be, sitting at the kitchen table, coffee in hand. I launched into a full-blown rant, unloading everything the therapist had said. He didn't interrupt, didn't flinch. He just listened, steady as ever, letting me burn through the rage. He never made me feel like a fool for any of it.
"What would they know anyway?
He said, his voice low but sure.
It's not like anyone else has been here for you. Great things are waiting. You just have to be patient. It'll find you."
Carter's always had a way of pulling me back from the edge. He could take something bleak and stretch it into something manageable, sometimes even hopeful. Like when we were kids and he slept over for the first time. We built this huge blanket fort in my room, trying to make the night feel like something special. In reality, the fort was barely more than a single worn bedsheet and a heavy blanket I used year-round because it was the only one we had. The thing had holes in it, but somehow those became windows to an imaginary world. Carter never once complained. I never went to his house. He always said it wasn't worth visiting, that it was in worse shape than mine. I never pushed him on it, but ever since that therapy session, Carter's been different. There's a dullness to him now, like someone turned the volume down on who he used to be. He was never loud or overly animated, but he had this quiet confidence, this warmth that filled the room. Lately, it feels like that warmth has been leaking out little by little. The first time I realized something might really be wrong was over breakfast. Mornings are my favorite time of day. Cooking is one of the few things that brings me real joy, so I like to have my time with it. Laying out the plates, setting the table just right. That morning was no different until I looked down and noticed I had set 3 plates. 3. I stood there just staring at them. The plates were spotless, gleaming in the morning light. I couldn't remember placing the 3rd one, couldn't explain it. It just was there. And for a moment I couldn't breathe. As I cleared the extra setting from the table, I kept trying to piece together when I could have put it down. I followed the same morning routine for years, same motions, same rhythm, and I couldn't remember ever making that kind of mistake before. Maybe I was still half asleep. Morning haze can do strange things to memory, right? We have 4 chairs at our little dining table, but only 2 ever get any use. It's not like Carter and I entertain guests. When I mentioned the 3rd plate to him, he gave a shrug and a reassuring smile.
I'm sure it's just morning grogginess. Don't overthink it. You should try starting your day with coffee sometime. Might help shake the sleep off.
He took a sip from his mug as he spoke, and I found myself frowning. "When did you even make that?" I asked. "You were in the kitchen with me the whole time." He smiled, that same half-playful smirk he always uses when he's dodging something.
I have my ways,
he said, raising the cup in a mock toast. I rolled my eyes and went back to cleaning up. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was making something out of nothing. I hadn't slept well the night before, and that could have thrown me off more than I realized. The downstairs neighbors were restless again. Our building has paper-thin walls, and last night the noise seeped through every surface. A low, indistinct murmur of voices, just loud enough to know someone was talking, but never clear enough to make out the words. That might have been fine, annoying but tolerable, if not for the scratching. A low, indistinct murmur of voices, just loud enough to know someone was talking, but never clear enough to make out the words. That might have been fine, annoying but tolerable, if not for the scratching. It started around midnight. At first, I thought they were moving furniture, maybe packing for a move. But the longer it went on, the more it sounded deliberate. Less like dragging and more like clawing. Not from the floor below us either. It was coming up from the wall. From Carter's wall. His bedroom shares a wall with mine, and I figured maybe there's an exposed pipe running up from below. Maybe some kind of vibration was traveling through the plumbing. That had to be it. But I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever it wasn't coming from beneath us. It was coming from beside me. I know for a fact it's not Carter. He's quieter than a mouse, always has been. Not once have I heard a sound come from his room. Sometimes it's eerie how silent he can be. But then again, that's part of what makes him such a good roommate. When I mentioned the noise, he shrugged like it was nothing.
I didn't hear anything last night. Maybe the quiet just got to you?
And when I said the scratching was coming from the wall between our rooms, he didn't even blink.
Nope. Didn't hear a thing.
He took another sip from his coffee, calm as ever. From that night on, the disturbances didn't stop. They became constant, scratching, murmuring, a pressure in the walls. But Carter? He never heard a thing. One evening, the rain came down in sheets thick enough to erase the sky. The kind of rain that makes you think about flash floods and emergency kits. Carter and I sat by the window in silence, watching the storm unfold. From our apartment, I looked down at the street below like an unseen observer detached from the world moving beneath us. Cars rolled down through deep puddles, spraying water onto the sidewalks. A few people with umbrellas braved the storm, fighting against the wind and losing. Every gust bent them sideways. It all felt so small from up here, so far away. I traced a raindrop down the window with my fingertip. It left a faint trail of condensation that vanished a moment later. Carter stayed at the windowsill, unmoving, his gaze fixed on the storm. Eventually, I left him there and turned to something more productive. I had a few old boxes buried in the closet I've been meaning to go through. Keepsakes, junk, forgotten pieces of myself. A rainy evening felt like the right time. I changed into an old t-shirt and knelt in front of the closet, ready to sort through whatever dusty memories were waiting for me. Inside were the usual odds and ends from high school. My old track jersey, technically stolen I guess, but it was senior year. Did they really expect me to give it back? A few worn journals from when I thought I might have some artistic talent. I tried, but it never really stuck. I flipped through the pages. Most were blank. A few were filled with doodles, cartoon characters from childhood, animals drawn with surprising care. There were also graphite sketches, messy and dark, from a phase where I thought smudged shadows and dramatic eyes meant depth. To be honest, some of them still held up. The shading, the weight of the expression. I gave myself credit where it was due. A small smile crept across my face as I kept flipping through. There's a section from when I tried to draw my friends for practice. Izzy was my first victim. Her head was drawn too circular and her hair was barely detailed with nothing more than a few scratches of my pencil. Then there was Vincent, who was even worse. Lastly, Carter appeared. I raise my eyebrow as I stare at it. He's got short, buzzed hair and a big button nose along with some braces marked into his teeth. Carter? This looks nothing like Carter. I don't recall him ever having braces. I don't think he's ever had hair that short either. He also has black hair and not light hair like the drawing makes it out to be. I placed the drawing to the side and make a note to mention it to him later. Maybe I put his name there by accident? I continued going through the box and come across a binder full of old photos my mom must have printed out. Oh boy, I have no idea what embarrassing moments these could contain. The first few pages are standard childhood photos. There's one from when I was in the cradle in the hospital, my first ever picture. Another from kindergarten, a team photo from my youth football team. I went through every single one, enjoying my stroll through memory lane. Names and faces come pouring into my memory all at once. I can't believe how much I've forgotten over the years. But then again, I guess that's what age and deteriorating mental health will get you. As we get to my middle school pictures, I begin to notice a common trend. There are a few birthday pictures I examine, and just as I remember, there weren't many kids in attendance. What catches me off guard about this is that Carter isn't in a single photo. I know for a fact he was at my 10th birthday party. He was on my laser tag team. It was one of the rare times my parents could afford to take me out to play the game. I remember that day vividly. The laughter, the lights, the sharp click of tokens in my hand. That memory still feels real, solid. Later, while digging through an old box of keepsakes, I found a photo from my middle school graduation. We were all lined up in the auditorium, a small class, no more than 60 of us. Smiling faces, slouched shoulders, awkward posture. But Carter wasn't in the picture. I stared at it for a long time. I knew he was there that day. We'd stood right next to each other during the ceremony, whispering about how the principal's fly had been down the entire time. I laughed, he laughed, it happened. But in the photo, there's just a gap, a strange, too wide space between me and the kid on my right, like someone had been erased. I shook off the unease and kept sorting through the box. Old notebooks, broken keychains, a crumpled birthday card from my aunt. Eventually, I separated everything into two piles. Keep, discard. Task done, I returned to the window. Outside, not much had changed. Rain streaked down the glass in lazy trails, and Carter was still there, silent, gazing down at the street below like he was waiting for something. "I found an old graduation photo from middle school," I said, keeping my voice light. "You're, not in it." He didn't turn around.
I'm not exactly the most photogenic person. Probably just out of frame. Surprised you dug that all up.
I hesitated, then handed him the sketch I'd drawn years ago. His face, the way I remembered it back then. Carter frowned, deeply, his eyes scanning the drawing, then narrowed.
That's not me. I never had braces, and I never wore my hair short.
He turned back to the window, the conversation dead in the air. I stood there for a moment longer, unsure of what to say. There was something cold in the room now, something just behind his voice. I gave him space. There was still a lot to do around the apartment, and the rain wasn't going to stop anytime soon. Later that night, after Carter and I had retreated to our rooms, I noticed a trash bag in the bin that hadn't been there earlier. I hesitated, guilt tightening in my chest, but my eyes drifted towards Carter's closed door. Curiosity won out. As quietly as I could, I opened the bag. Inside were all the middle school photos, creased, crumpled, some torn clean down the middle. At the very bottom, my sketch of Carter lay ripped in half, the face split perfectly between the eyes. I stood there for a moment, unsure of what to feel. Then, without a word, I folded the bag closed and returned to my room. I had barely shut the door before the scratching in the walls began again. It was louder this time. The dining table became a problem. Every morning before breakfast, I'd wake to find it perfectly set for 3. Matching plates, neatly placed forks, and folded napkins. At dinner, the same. Always 3 settings. Carter swore he wasn't doing it, and I knew I wasn't either. Still, the third place would appear, no matter how often I cleared it. By the end of the first week, I'd had enough. I dragged the 2 extra chairs out to the curb, just old furniture now, free to whoever wanted them. But the next morning, all 4 chairs were back, arranged like they had never been moved. When I asked Carter about it, he only shrugged.
I thought you kept changing your mind,
he said. By mid-September, I was drinking. A lot. Carter said it would help with the dreams, the ones where the walls pulsed like lungs and the floor stretched inside beneath my feet. In the worst of them, my skin peeled away in strips, soft and clean like wax paper. The scratching in the walls never stopped. It grew more desperate, like whatever was inside was clawing at something deeper than drywall. I told myself it was rats, even when I stopped believing it. At night, just before sleep, I started to hear whispers. Faint, unintelligible, but insistent. Mouthing words against the fabric of the room. They weren't speaking to me. They were speaking about me. Carter talked to me a lot during that time.
You just need to sleep.
He'd whisper at night, perched at the edge of my bed like he belonged there. His voice was gentle, almost kind, but it never comforted me. Once, I asked him if he ever slept. He didn't answer, just sat there, still and watching, until I drifted off. One morning, I woke to the sharp, ear-splitting buzz of the doorbell. The sound tore through my skull like a siren, pulling me from some thick, dreamless place. Half-dressed in wrinkled pajamas, I staggered to the window and looked down at the entrance to our building. 2 police officers stood just outside, shifting awkwardly on their feet. Then the intercom crackled.
This is a wellness check. We need to speak with the resident in Unit 3C.
A jolt of cold ran down my spine. I didn't answer, I didn't move at first. Then, heart hammering, I scrambled to the closet and pulled out the hammer I kept for fixing loose nails and broken drawer handles. I held it in both hands, raised above my head, and crept towards the front door. Behind me, Carter's voice returned, low, urgent.
It's a trap. They're here for me. They want to take me away from you.
I froze, still as the dead. The buzzer rang again and again, but I didn't open the door. I couldn't. Somewhere deep down, a sliver of doubt rushed to the surface, but Carter crushed it before it could fully form.
It was that no-good therapist of yours. Maybe even your mother, too.
He sounded so sure, so calm. I took his word for it. Days later, I woke up to the word liar gouged into the ceiling above my bed. Deep, jagged scratches had torn through the plaster, curling the paint like dried skin. Dust flaked down onto my pillow like dandruff from something diseased. I blinked hard, heart thundering, then slowly raised my hands. My fingernails were cracked, torn, red seeped from the beds of my nails, sticky and caked with dried blood. That morning, Carter stared at me over the rim of his coffee mug.
You need to get rid of them.
I blinked at him, still dizzy from the ceiling. Who?
The ones poisoning you.
Time lost its structure. I couldn't tell whether I was dreaming or awake anymore. Sometimes I'd find the third chair in my bedroom right at the foot of the bed. I'd wake with a start and catch a flicker of something sitting in it, just for a heartbeat, a tall, shadowed silhouette. It had no eyes. I tried to lie to myself, told myself it wasn't real, but I knew what I saw. Every hour I stayed awake, the apartment seemed to close in tighter. The walls flexed with breath I couldn't hear. The scratching followed me behind the dry wall, under the floorboards, inside the vents. Sometimes I'd feel it underfoot as I walked, as though something beneath the floor was trying to claw its way through. I stopped sleeping. Carter said it was safer that way. When my phone rang that afternoon, I hesitated. No one ever called me anymore. But curiosity finally broke through the fog. Mom? Her name on the screen looked strange, out of place, like it belonged to another life. I answered. For a moment, her voice was clear, too clear, and for the first time in weeks, I could breathe again.
It's been a while since we last talked. I just wanted to check in. Make sure you weren't getting lonely out there in the city.
I almost laughed. No, I'm not lonely. Carter's here with me. There was a pause on the line. Then I heard it. Her breath catching, trembling on the edge of words she couldn't quite say.
Sweetheart.
She said, voice thin as glass.
I can't enable this anymore, honey. Carter isn't there.
Her voice on the phone was trembling, but steady enough to land every word like a dagger.
You used to talk to yourself for hours. Your father and I thought it was cute. For a while. Imaginary friends are normal for kids, but sweetie, you need to give this thing up. I thought your therapist would have helped you confront this by now.
My breath hitched. How dare she say that about Carter?
Please, hon, just take a breath. Everything will be alright. Just let me...
I hung up, and everything went still. The scratching in the walls stopped, the air froze. For a moment, I thought I had silenced the whole world. I turned around, and Carter was standing in the doorway. His eyes were darker than before, endless.
She's lying, you know. She wants to replace me.
That night, I confronted him. I don't believe in you anymore, I said. He tilted his head, puzzled, like I'd said something in a language he couldn't understand.
I've always been here.
He said with his voice rising.
I was there when no one else wanted you. You made me. You need me. You can't live without me.
I grabbed the third chair, the one that was never supposed to be there. I hauled it toward him, swinging with everything I had. If it made contact, I didn't feel it. Carter was gone before it landed, but I kept going. I chased him, smashing the chair against the walls, the floor. The fourth chair appeared. When had I even bought these chairs? I shattered that too. And when they finally crumbled in my hands, the house screamed. Mouths opened along the walls. Dozens, hundreds. They whispered his name. Carter. He's in the floor now. The smashed chairs return each morning, whole again, waiting, watching. I hear the apartment breathing when I close my eyes. Sometimes I think it inhales me. I don't know how long it was after the phone call with my mother. Time unraveled. Eventually, the police forced their way in. They found me, naked, curled beneath the dining table, rocking back and forth, muttering to the empty chair across from me. There was no Carter. There never was. But no matter where they take me, hospital, halfway house, locked ward, when the lights go out and the room goes quiet, I hear the scrape of a chair sliding across the floor. And Carter is there, setting a place for someone else.